Alexa, we talk a lot about building accessibility into the product from the start. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about the first things that we consider when we're getting into that, and when we decided to implement accessibility in our product.
Yeah, sure. So I actually wanted to even take a step prior to that, because I think I'll talk about how I do think it starts with design. However, there's really the prior step to that, which is you have to kind of understand the space a little bit better. So if you're new to this, or you're just starting to learn about this area, I think it's important to realize that there's a lot of great resources out there. So hopefully it doesn't feel too overwhelming, and you can go to those sources. And one of the things that I would recommend is a great place to start is actually taking some time to watch videos of people with different disabilities interacting with websites or apps, and you can find those on YouTube. And I think that will really give you a better idea into like the bigger picture and really why this is important, and then the different challenges that people will face. It's really powerful to watch someone actually interacting with a website using some of these tools. So I would recommend that as a first step. And then once you have kind of that background in place, then I think it really starts with design. So that the app or the website has to be designed with accessibility in mind. And so it's really important that your design team understands that and has people on the team who understand kind of the best practices in that space and are continually learning, because these things change pretty often. And then of course, the engineering team as well. So it isn't just about design, it also needs to be implemented correctly. So it goes across the whole kind of product org. Everybody has to be involved. Everyone needs to kind of understand why we're doing this and how to go about it. And one of the things that we've done at Deem is we have a couple people on the design and engineering team who are really passionate about this and have a lot of knowledge. And so they've done, knowledge share sessions. And right now we've just done them with inside Prod Tech, but I'm hoping we can kind of bring that to the rest of the company to really explain kind of what are the best practices here, how can we go about doing this so that everybody's aware, and it just raises awareness across the whole org about how this is a really important area. And lastly, I'll just mention that evaluating accessibility is really hard. So there are tools out there that you can use, and there's some great tools. But one of the things that we've been able to do, and this has been really lucky for us, is that we've had some people with disabilities who've actually been able to test our app and give us feedback on the usability. And that's really key, because a tool can tell you things, but having someone who actually has the disability use your app and go through it and give you feedback on it is so much more powerful.
I often am talking to corporations about how important it is to make sure they're accommodating their employees throughout their entire geo footprint. So when you're talking about the efforts that Deem has made to be accessible, do you mind just giving us some examples of what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I can give a few examples. So I think, technology and design can really play a big role in improving the user experience for users with disabilities. So, but it can also seem very overwhelming at first. So I'll just call out a few areas that we tackled kind of initially, just to give you some ideas. So one of those is around color blindness and contrast. So if you think about when you're using an app or a website, it's really important to make sure that you can distinguish between different types of information. And so if you're only doing that using colors, that can be really hard for someone who is colorblind because they can't see the difference. So having things like other signals like text or icons in the UI so that you can differentiate things is really important. There's also, with the use of color, you don't want to have colors that are too similar to each other, because again, you can't see the contrast between them, you can't see the difference. So those color pairings are also quite important. And then in terms of contrast, some people will use like a high contrast setting on their phones. And so if you're not careful with the design, this can not make your app look very good, or it can be hard to see the screens when you have high contrast mode on. So that's another area that we've tested to make sure that all the screens still work in high contrast mode and that they're easy to read. And one other area I'll call out is for people who are blind. And so for those watching that may not know this, so if you're blind, people will often use a screen reader or tools like VoiceOver and TalkBack, which are mobile tools, to be able to access apps or websites online. And so what this does is it goes through and it reads the screen to you. And so building this out is really hard. It's really hard to get it right, because you need to make sure that the screen reader is reading everything in the right order, but you also have to give the right context, because a lot of times the context is in visual cues, right, on the page or the order that things are shown, and that won't be clear if you can't view the app. So you have to make sure you've got the context clear, so when someone's tapping a button, they know what that button's doing and they know that they're tapping a button. So that's another area that we've focused on, and that's a really important one to get right, and it takes a lot of iterations to get that.
So I'd like to ask both of you this, actually. Why is it so important that companies have a focus on accessibility? Deborah, why don't we start with you?
Well, I just also want to comment on Alexa's the conversation she was having about the designers and the engineers, because it sort of also will answer your question, Harper, and that why is it so important? Well, why do we have technology? And shouldn't technology work for human beings? And the reality is that sometimes as humans, we don't see as well. I remember the day it seemed I turned 40, which is a long time ago. I just couldn't see as well anymore. But luckily I had a 16-year-old so I could show my phone to him and say, who's calling me? But that was inconvenient for me. So we've got to make sure that technology is addressed all throughout the process, which is what Alexa said when she was talking about the designers and the engineers, but the testers. And I think we can't think about accessibility as compliance. I know here in the United States, we often think about that because we're suing companies over this, but we have to think about it. How do you have the best experience? How do your customers have the very best experience? And when you make things accessible, it is going to improve the experience for every single one of your customers. It is also going to allow your customers to age with your products and services. So this is no longer a nice to have. Human beings need to be able to use technology. We need to have access to technology, but also to our buildings, to our transportations, to our homes. And so accessibility is not a nice to have. And you cannot talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion if you're not talking about accessibility. So I think it's just really important for the leaders like Deem to step up and say, no, we're proud that we have made security and privacy and accessibility part of what we're doing, because we want everyone to successfully use this technology. So it's just no longer I wish we could do it, it's too hard. No, it's just part of doing business now. Technology should work for human beings.
Yeah. Alexa, we approach this mostly from a technology perspective, but just in general, I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Deborah said. And I think, my first time that I kind of heard about accessibility was at a previous company when we were dealing with a lawsuit. So I think that's how maybe some people have kind of learned about accessibility, which is unfortunate. But I do think we've gotten, and I mean, that was years ago. I really think we've moved to a new point now where it's not just about avoiding a lawsuit, right? Or compliance, as you said, Deborah. It's really around, we want our products and our services to be inclusive. And that means that we need to be able to serve this part of the population that, has a disability. And as you said, I think it's really interesting to think about it as it's people who, as they get older, they need, I'm about to hit that point too, where I might need to get glasses. I have to enlarge things on my screen. It's like, it's things like that we need to be able to address too. So I agree with you that it's really about, building a product, and whether that's a digital product or physical, but making that accessible to everybody, I think is really key.
Well, Deborah and Alexa, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to talk about accessibility on World Accessibility Day. I want to say that we've been hearing more and more from our customers and our partners, our travel suppliers, that this is becoming a much bigger topic for them, whether it's pressure from their employees or legal pressure, but most of all, part of their DEI efforts to make sure that they're being as inclusive as possible. So we're really excited to work with the rest of the travel industry. I know there's a lot of exciting things happening, especially around stitching all that together so that it's a more seamless experience. But thank you to both, really appreciate it. And for everyone at home, thank you. Have a great day.